Right, all right. Oh, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Did you get the book? Did you get the book they brought to you? Great. Um, one of the problems with phenomenal general sessions is that we get inspiration, right? But we rarely get an opportunity to hear about the practical application of that inspiration. So that's one of the reasons we created this particular session, to give us the opportunity to see precisely what the EVOKE process looks like and how it can be applied in our work as financial advisors. So we've customized this session. I want you to know what you're getting into here, what to expect. So George is going to conduct a live interview with somebody he just met, Scott Kraft, who is, well, let me give you Scott's quote. When I asked him, hey, would you be willing to do a live demo in front of a whole bunch of people with George Kinder? Here's how he responded. This is Scott Kraft of Capstone Advisors. Do you mind if I share this, Scott? Well, it's going to happen anyway. And I quote, who would not jump at the chance to be emotionally naked before a group of my closest strangers? Yeah. So let's give Scott Kraft a hand right now. So George is going to conduct a mini demo of the EVOKE process with Scott, and then we're going to invite up 3 more folks who have been practicing life planning, who are registered life planners with George. They're going to be David and Mary Aransky, a dynamic planning duo who are right here in St. Louis, by the way. And then Scott Frank, a buddy of mine, and really just a beach bum from Cardiff by the Sea, north of San Diego. That's a laugh point. Like, that's an opportunity. He's not just a beach bum. He's a financial advisor, for goodness sakes. And that was actually one of the points I wanted to make here, because we could fall prey to the notion that this whole life planning thing is only for people who are just a little bit too familiar with the warm and the fuzzy. Could we not? Like, that, you're tempted to almost question whether or not this is for real financial advisors or it's for people who like teach yoga and stuff like that, right? So I want you to know that Scott is not just a beach bum anyway. He's a certified financial planner, as is David and Mary. He also started in the business with his CFA. David also has his CPA PFS. These are folks who are technically astute financial planners who simply believe that life planning as a central part of financial planning is just the right way to do it. Sound good? All right. Let's welcome these guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I begin the demo, I just want to give context to all of you. You saw the 5 phases that EVOKE has. I'm not totally clear, because I just met Scott, where we're going to go. I've got a general idea of how long. It won't be a long time, but maybe somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. And I don't know, we'll have some of the E, which is exploration, some just listening. We'll have some of the V, which is the inspiration, the lighting the torch element. And there may be a bit of the O, the obstacle meeting as well. But I'm really not sure. What is going to be most valuable for you is if you observe and are largely watching what I'm doing. What's different about this interview from what you normally do? What are the different qualities? And what are the different actions, the specifics of it? And after Scott and I finish, and we'll talk just a little bit, we'll debrief ourselves a bit. Then I'm going to bring up the 3 experts, and Scott's going to get off the hook. Let's not, pigeonhole him with questions. It's challenging enough for him to be up here, as he said, naked in front of all of you. We'll bring up the 3 experts, and I'm going to ask them to do the same thing I'm asking you to do, which is to notice what I'm doing. I'm wondering if you want to be more over on this side some, if you want to watch. Oh, you've got the screen too. But I'm going to ask them to watch what I'm doing and then come up and each of them give their own take of what they saw. And then we're going to open to Tim and the experts talking about what is it to actually run a life planning business? What's it all about? Okay? So, starting here with Scott. Let's aim our chairs just slightly more toward each other if we can. Good? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to stand up, and you might stand up too, and just model, it's wonderful to see you.
Wonderful
Really,
to meet you.
wonderful to meet you. I've been really looking forward to this. I've been knowing you were going to come, but and I've had a chance to glance at your materials. So I'm very excited about this meeting, and I apologize from the beginning that it has to be so short.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry that Bev was not able to make it.
Well, I'm just wonderful that you have the time that we can share, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, wonderful,
Really am.
wonderful,
Yeah.
fantastic. Good, Scott. Well, let's have a seat. And you did share some material, so I've had a chance to glance at it. But tell me coming to see me, what would you like to come out of an engagement, a piece of work with me?
Well, at this point in my life, moving toward this second half,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so really looking for a way to live what I would call a meaningful life where I can move from the work of kind of building to now giving back and finding meaning in what I'm doing that is outside of me and myself to the broader community,
Wow.
to the broader world.
Yeah, wow. Fabulous, really incredible place.
So how do I do that? That my question and my problem is,
Yeah.
I know I want to do it.
Yeah,
I don't know what that looks like,
yeah,
and I don't know how to make it happen.
right.
So I would like to
Wow.
know how to make that happen.
Wow, it sounds so exciting. And I've immediately got a question, which is, how do you think it's going to happen? How would you make it happen?
I don't know. That's the issue of, I don't know. That's why I need a back and forth to bounce ideas off of, to get some ideas of how to make that happen.
Yeah.
We know, so my wife and I both recently got back from a mission trip, and both of us really felt at home, and we felt like there was a real sense of purpose in that.
Wow.
We actually it was our 37th anniversary,
Wow.
and we spent
God.
painting an orphanage. And she commented to me, said it was probably one of the most meaningful anniversaries we had. And I said,
Wow.
how do we make that happen? How do we then make more a greater part of our lives?
Wow, incredible.
Living there,
Yeah.
right? Helping people.
Wow, how beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow, well, let's make it happen.
I would love to
Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
I think you're in the right place for this
Okay.
conversation and to
Okay.
move toward action. Yeah, great. Well, so you sent in some material that I requested from really the vision part of the process that we do. And I know that I don't have Bev's. I've just got yours, which is fine, but it would be wonderful next time if we were to have Bev and have her here.
Yes.
And have you both kind of richly define your own individual torch and then bring them together. Because it's important that she has as much say, as much character in this as you do. Yeah.
Because a big part of life is finishing it well, and finishing it well with the love of my life, right?
Yeah, beautiful, man, beautiful. 37 years, pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. All right. Well, there are several ways that I might go through this. There's, you did an exercise called the 3 questions. And normally I would go through each element and pause, and we'd have a really rich discussion about the whole thing. But knowing that we have this real shortness of time, I might just do the answers to question number 3.
Okay, sure.
And, and I might touch on a couple of the other things that you brought up.
Okay.
There's a couple of factual things I wanted to check. You've got 4 children.
Yes.
How old are they?
Got them from age 30 down to 19.
30 down to 19?
30, 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
20,
right.
27 and 25. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, I know they're a very important part of your life.
Yes.
And your consideration, as I've seen in your material.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, my son works in the business with me. And so that's been a delight and a pleasure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that Andy?
That's Andy.
Oh, fantastic. I was wondering, I was going to ask you a question about Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, as you've seen, that's one of the areas as well, as being able to take what we do, which we do in this business. We do serve people, right? And that's and this experience of this past weekend being here, and just getting into the personal side of what we do, right? We are giving back, and how do we help other people reach that sense of purpose and meaning? And so helping him move along, okay, in this business to promote it, that would be one of the goals that I would see wanting to take place, is getting him in a position where he can thrive in helping others as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And is he very much, I mean, this languaging it just runs through all of your materials about giving back.
Yeah.
Is he very much on target with that as well?
He is. So he is in Charlotte, North Carolina. He volunteers for nonprofits, and he actually just started a podcast where he's interviewing, bringing in nonprofits, letting them expose what they do to the world. So he very much has a generous heart.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, at some point, we'll have to get him in here as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, lovely. Well, would it be all right, in just given the shortness of time that we have, if I simply read back to you what you have in question number 3?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
And then I'll see if I can summarize it, and I may bring in a couple of other things from a couple of other areas.
Okay. All right.
So again, question number 3, 24 hours left.
Mm-hmm.
You just discovered that from the doctor. And there's nothing you can do. And the question is, reflecting on all the things that you'd anticipated doing, what did you miss? Who did you not get to be? Who will you not get to be? What did you not get to do? And I'm going to read what you responded.
Okay.
Is there anything that's happened since you wrote the answers here that you think might have changed your response here?
No. That was a challenging exercise.
Yeah, great.
Right. Really challenging. Yeah.
Good. Yeah,
It's hard to put yourself there, right?
it is. Yeah. But meaningful.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So here's what you wrote. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 bullet points. So we might pause briefly after each and see if there's anything to add. So the first is, I would feel as though I missed the chance. This was the very first thing you wrote. I would feel as though I missed the chance to make some small contribution to lift any of the voiceless oppressed. Pardon me, I get a little teary. Out of suffering. Who simply need opportunity, encouragement, and some practical wisdom and knowledge that could have shared. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I just spent some time with somebody who in India who they rescue girls out of kind of mothers in brothels.
Wow.
And tried to pull them out and educate them. And
Wow. Yeah. First thing you wrote.
that'd be a way to help
Yeah.
relieve some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this feels urgent.
Yeah. Sure it does. It does.
Yeah. So clearly this is part of the plan that we'll develop and
Okay.
put out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay.
Would it be all right if I go to the second
Yeah.
response? So the second one was briefer. I will have missed walking my youngest daughter down the aisle.
Yeah, I have 4 kids. 3 are have been down the aisle.
Oh.
Have 1 to go.
Oh.
And early on, it's one of the things that I said, gee, if I can just get my children. I mean, right, life is uncertain,
Yeah.
and we don't have a promise of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I've had that sense of awareness, of, so I don't want to ever live with regret. And one of the things I just always, maybe selfishly thought, can I just see if I can get all of them down the aisle, get them set, and on a path of a good life.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really what the next 3 elements are about. And so I'm going to read them all together, a little bit longer. Would it be all right if I read
Yes.
them?
Yes.
I will have missed loving and nurturing my grandchildren, teaching them the most important things in life are meaningful relationships and how well we love others, especially those who think and act very differently from us. That grace and mercy triumph over judgment. I would miss showing them that as we give our lives away, we receive life back. That happiness is a reward for living justly. Yeah. I would have missed telling them gratefulness brings contentment. And contentment is found not by comparing themselves with those who have more, but by giving themselves away to those who have less. These are, wow, wonderful, profound.
It's what I want to leave with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what I want them to remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. More than anything, this is what you want to leave. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So there's some words that run through all of these pages that you've given me, and some of them are coming out here, and I'm just going to mention them and leave the open space to see if you have anything to add. Meaningful relationships, grace and mercy triumph over judgment. Happiness is a reward for living justly. And gratefulness brings contentment. And giving ourselves away to those who have less.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my view of why I'm here does obviously has a very strong component of faith to it.
Yeah.
And I believe we've been put here for a purpose,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And our purpose is to serve. So we're stewards
Yeah.
of this earth. We're stewards of our time, our money, and ourselves, and our talents. And I think we've been here we're here to make the world a better place,
Yeah.
to seek human flourishing for the common good. Yeah. And that's what leaves meaning in life, and that's what runs through those elements that you see there that I feel very strongly about, that it's not at the end of the day ending with the most toys. I'm a pretty simple person. Don't need a lot. But I do want to make sure that when I leave, I felt like I did what I was supposed to do while I was here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Very impressive. Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So a couple more things, and then if we could, I'd love to see if I can summarize this and bring a few other things in.
Okay.
Enjoy the gifts of material abundance that they have but to be generous. So that's again toward your grandchildren, children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And then the final thing you wrote was, I would not have time to put in written form what my wife and each child has meant to me, how proud I am of them, and how they've shaped and served as a driving influence for good in my life.
Yeah. One day left. They have all impacted me and experienced me in such a great degree, shaped my life, taught me many different things. And with one day left, I would not have been able to put in the language to the extent, the degree, the expression of what they have accomplished and meant to me with one day left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah.
We've got to make that part of the plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah. Great. We will.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
So again, in the shortness of time, I'm wondering, would it be all right if I summarize these things into some kind of image of where you might be going?
Please.
And I'm going to bring in a few other things that I noticed.
Please.
So let me just mention, so I don't surprise you, something about fitness, because I know that's very important to you. Something about your special times that you've had with Bev. Maybe something about finding the right place to live. Some of these things are in there.
They are.
And something about your business, but also about what you've just shared here. Would it be all right if I put together something?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Scott, if as a consequence of our work together, I or we were to deliver to you a moment, maybe, let's say, 1.5 years from now. You've finally done it. You're sitting on a chaise lounge. Bev is right next to you, holding hands, sipping whatever your favorite drink is, if you do, and enjoying the sunset over the beach in Maui. Back for your second honeymoon, now 39 years later. And you're doing it, something you've longed to do all your life. And Bev is looking at you and she's just saying, I can't believe what we've done together with our life and what you've done in particular. And so sharply over the last 1.5 years, how much attention you've paid to what really we've come to understand as our final chapter now, as the next chapter, at least in our life. And it's wonderful being fit with you and really taking that on and to be here in this incredible climate. That's meant a lot to me. It's been wonderful to see you take Andy under your wing and really bring him into this life planning piece where, in fact, he's delivering, as you've been delivering, people into their dreams of meaningful lives. And you've been doing it throughout the community with rich and poor. It doesn't matter where how much resources they have. You've been dedicated to that. And what's wonderful about being here in Maui, I could feel a little, guilty or everything, but I know that we're spending real time with the native population here. And giving back and connecting with the churches and the service organizations that are here, with the people who really experience extreme poverty here, and working to give back. And as she's sharing that with you, you hear this voice from the background. In fact, you hear 4 voices from the background going, surprise! And your 4 children have joined you and are so happy to be there on this family vacation with you. and are going to be going to do some of the service work all with you, working with the voiceless oppressed, as you've called them, to bring them out. And they're all so thrilled with how you and Bev have been wrestling with and coming to a vision of the next place you're going to live. And you've decided between the North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida location that you're going to be in, but also included these special trips to places that are challenged. So Scott, if as a consequence of our work together, I or we were to deliver that world, that moment to you, how would that be?
Oh, that would be superb, exciting. It would bring me a sense of probably more contentment, because I know where I'm going, and I can get there, and bringing the closer rather than seeing it far off and distant would excite me.
Fantastic.
A lot.
Fantastic. Let me add one thing to that. That night when you get together with everybody and people are toasting you for what you've done and how much you've accomplished, you return the favor and you draw out the sheets of paper that you've written with your gratitude and thanks for Bev, for Andy, and for each of your other children. And you read it to them, sharing your gratitude for what they've brought to you.
That is a fantastic idea.
Great.
Fantastic idea.
Great. Shall we do it?
We should do it.
All right, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you. Great. Thank you
Wonderful.
so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we're ending that session, and I want to just turn to Scott and ask him, how was that for you?
Well, so when we're getting into some of these areas, I had difficulty getting some of because of the emotion. I'm an emotional person.
Yeah.
And when you started to probe in, I felt it deep here, and a challenge to get out the thought that I wanted to get out.
Sure.
But it was very. The conversation that we had was unlike any that I've had before, in terms of your entering into my life with me, and that empathy. I felt a real sense of empathy in our conversation. I could even see in your eyes that empathy coming through. And so that encouraged me and was comforting. And I think you heard and understood and listened and fed back. You got the picture of where I was. An M. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But it touched some emotion that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So imagine that we'd done an exploration meeting before this meeting, where a lot of this had come out, and now we've done this meeting and come to a vision. Bev has contributed her vision as well, and then we bring those together. How would that be?
Oh, that would be just, it's life-changing, right?
Yeah.
Life-changing.
Yeah.
It sets the life on a whole different trajectory and a path, and life-changing.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before I bring some of the experts up to talk about what the methodology was that we used?
No, I don't think so.
I want to thank you tremendously, and perhaps we can give a big hand of applause for Scott's. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So if we could bring up now the 3 RLPs, and then in a moment we'll call Tim up as well to interview us in a way. And what I'd like to do with the 3 of you, because each of you have been to 5 days and seen this process multiple times, what did you see? What would you like the audience to know about the process that we just did, that I just went through? What did you see that I did that that stood out as part of what we do in life planning and brought levels of meaning for Scott and make the business better, make what we're aiming for better. So what did you see, each of you?
Yeah, so the first thing that I noticed when I started looking at this process is we, a lot of times as advisors, we view our job as to be the hero and to step in and solve problems for people right away. And what you'll notice is that George was not running that meeting. He was running the meeting, but the client, he was always inviting the client to take the next step and always asking if he could move on and always teeing him up for what's next. So he wasn't jumping in and solving, he was guiding. And it sounds like a subtle difference, but it makes such a huge difference when it comes to the depth that you get with a client.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Scott. Yeah. Thank you.
And as he's listening, he's using a lot of gutturals or single word like wow or ah, so that he shows that he's listening and really feeling it, but without directing it or starting to steer it down any sort of way. It's just showing that you're following along with it.
Yeah, and what I loved is even just how you started the conversation with such a warm welcome and an appreciation to create that space and that platform so that he was willing to feel comfortable and share what he wanted to. And the other thing that I thought was funny that Scott mentioned about how he felt about the experience is he said that emotion as you sort of dug in. And what I laughed at is you didn't dig in, you stepped back. And you did that pause and you gave him the space to have that emotion and to feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, thank you. Pretty much all I did was I read what was there. I mean, I didn't reframe in my language in some way. It was all his language. So it was just reading it back. Yeah, great. Yeah.
That's a really important point too, because sometimes people worry, is life planning like therapy? And I don't want to be a therapist. And you know, George never, even if he maybe had thoughts of, I wonder if this is important, or maybe this is driving this inspiration, he never asked directly for any of those more. He just stepped back, he kind of opened the door, and if they wanted to walk through it, they could, but never would, prod them for that.
Yeah. Another thing that you'll notice that George did was he followed the feelings. And it's something that we can feel almost at first, almost scared to do. But there was a moment when Scott was touched, very touched, right? He was really feeling something in that moment. And feelings happen as an arc. They don't happen as a thought. So George gave him space to feel that feeling.
And that feeling, George was talking about how important the pause is, and people, how long do I pause for? And the way you figure out how long to pause is you actually be in touch with your own feelings, and as that feeling kind of comes over you and then subsides and leaves, that's the time you're pausing, and you wait till the feeling is kind of finished before you move on.
Yeah. So part of the work is actually learning, exposing ourselves. Part of the training is learning to be more at peace with all of the feelings that are there so that you're not jittery with them, but you can actually go and feel them, knowing that they pass away. And as David says, then you've got all that information. If you know sadness is there, you can feel that sadness and watch it mature and ebb and flow inside yourself. And that's how you know how long the pause is. It's a beautiful piece. And it's all trainable. It's not, it's all trainable. Yeah. Shall we bring Tim in for additional questions and comments? I mean, I'm sure the four of us could just roll and roll, but I know Tim's got also the BAM culture in his mind. And
and one of the things I wanted to make sure everybody knew was how Scott was and wasn't prepped. So I sent Scott nothing more than the same email, copied and pasted, that I send to clients, and then the exercises, and then he did them. So yeah, we talked about the framework of this whole thing to make sure he was going to be comfortable with that, but he was not coached like advisor to advisor. Here's how to make the most out of that. So all the interaction was entirely genuine. And by the way, when you write things like happiness is a reward for living justly, and you have a desire to write stuff down, write a dang book, man. I mean, I don't know how that comes out of anybody's brainstorming. But I just wanted you to know that, because it almost appeared as though Scott was a plant, right? the conversation was so genuine. How in the world do you get to the point of emotion in a room like this, for goodness sakes? He wasn't a plant. He had no instructions other than what I'd give to the clients that I've done this process with. First question.
I just want to add one more
Please.
thing, if I could, Tim, and that is that you may be wondering, how does this benefit the business, your business? What does this have to do with money? And there's a whole bunch of things that are there. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm confirming the human nature of it all. And he's aware of the financial pieces. And we kind of we're alluding to it around Andy and other things. But you can see that there's a financing of this new life that he wants. And he now has confidence that I understand that life well enough that we can actually move forward into the financing piece. That's the incredible thing to me. Tim, yeah.
So my first question was, that appeared to be the longest opening handshake I have ever seen. Was that purposeful?
You know, it's rare that I
Or is that
do
just you?
It's rare, it's totally rare that I do that. I very rarely hold the person's hand in both hands. I know that's done sometimes, I've occasionally done it. And I just was so moved to meet him.
Yeah.
And I you know, you could see by the material that he'd shared that this was a very deep and dear man. And I was so moved. I wanted him to feel how moved I was by who he was.
Yeah.
And that was the best I could do in the moment.
Absolutely. I want to pause for a moment on this whole notion of guiding versus kind of directing and certainly telling, because I don't think that we all can appreciate quite so much how hard it is not to connect yourself to the conversation you're having. For example, I see that you had your you had your honeymoon in Hawaii. I have a house there. Like, it's natural in the conversation that we have with anybody that we'll have tonight over cocktails and dinner to attach ourselves to whatever they're saying. That's the natural thing to do. That's how we do it when we have conversation on a human level. But it's work to not do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you guys talk through that a little? Mary, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, and I do have a house in Hawaii, so that would have been the natural thing to do. Yeah, go ahead. Tell us how you guys are doing with it.
Sure. So the shift that happened for me was exactly that. And to back up just for a moment, always doing planning, having technical expertise, you tell the person what to go do, and they wouldn't go do it. And I used to think, well, then they're just not a good client, right? I told them what to do, and they didn't do it. That's on them. And what I realized was I didn't help them see what they really wanted. So I didn't direct all of their resources to what they really want. And once you start doing this, follow through happens on traditional planning. I'm not going to say it always happens, but it happens at a much higher rate, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Sorry, but I did sidetrack for a moment.
You attached yourself to it, Scott. Now, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Was it difficult for you? Was it challenging to do that, to perhaps fall out of the habits of normal conversation? Like George said, it's trainable.
It is hard because it's human nature. You want to connect with someone. You want to show them that connection. But I think it's just through practice and through seeing it a few times that if you can just keep your mouth shut, like, oh, I did my honeymoon in Hawaii too. If you can just like really practice staying quiet and just keeping that to yourself, you see how the conversation continues and what wonderful conversations you have. And I think it just takes some practice in seeing the results of that. And then it's much easier to keep your mouth closed because you know what a better conversation will follow through that.
Mm-hmm. You can still share that stuff if you want outside of the core of the meeting. So as they're on their way out and you're walking them out, to the elevator or the door, you can have more of that small talk and bring that in, but make the actual meeting about them. Don't take it over.
What happens? It's astonishing because if you interject that you've got the house in Hawaii, it all becomes about you, and the client begins to recognize, and you never know when that moment is when they're suddenly going to deepen. Or they're suddenly going to get excited. And it's like quantum leaps sometimes. They're talking about their 401k and suddenly their dad is dying. Mm-hmm. You don't know when they're going to that. You can't predict it. And if you interrupt with your stuff, you're likely to miss it.
Yeah.
So this is profound to practice, just really welcoming them and encouraging the flow of their conversation.
For anybody out there who knows me, you'd know this would have been one of the hardest things for me to do. I mean, whether it was unconscious or even conscious, I thought the way that you connected with people was to attach yourself. That's how I would endear myself to a client. That now they're seeing me as similar to them. Man, we made a great connection because I just told them a bunch of stuff about myself. Yeah. So for me, it actually took a directive. I had to come to grips with the fact that if I interrupted a client, ever, if I attached myself to their story, I was hijacking their meeting. Like I had to give myself a directive. You're being a poor financial advisor, and perhaps human, to hijack somebody's story, especially when they reach that level of vulnerability, right? One of the most important things about this that I don't know that we've delved deeply into is the relative recency of the time frame you're talking about. You mentioned it on the main stage, and then here you gave a torch. You lit the torch that was 18 months, about a year and a half. Now, I want to set this up. When we struggle to learn what it is that keeps clients motivated, I mean, we know some of the answers. Science has shown us. The concept of hyperbolic discounting, that the further something gets out, the further a reward goes out into the future, the less we see it as valuable. So one of the fundamental differences in what the life planning process does is it wrangles that in. And that's how we actually get that level of motivation. Right. Could you talk some more about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd known Scott more and better, because we could have done even more of that. There's a lot of issues that are revealed in the pages that he gave me, but I think there's a lot of the finance that I wasn't clear where the challenges were. Usually, clients think that they're going to do something in 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever number of years, and we really want them to get on it right away, because their excitement goes sky high. So my classic time frame is a year and a half. Sometimes I'll do it as short as a month, sometimes it's 3 years. But I want their excitement to be so high. When we deliver a torch, we're aiming that the excitement and the anxiety are matching, where they're so excited, but they're also going, can I do it? And because that's a huge level of energy that's coming out, and that means they're going to be able to do it. And of course, we're going to add our support. So that's my frame on it. I don't know if you guys have additional frames.
I mean, we always talk about long-term planning. We're always looking to age, 60s, maybe even 70 for retirement, and that's almost all the projections we do are far out. And so it is a shift in the mindset. And even when we've worked with younger people that are super high income and very good savers, and they're thinking, I'm going to work for 10, 15 years, and then I'm done. I'm going to retire in my 40s. And we're like, why are you waiting 10 or 15 years to do this? They think they're, beating the game and they're not going to work till their 60s. Like, why are we waiting even that long? Most of the things you want, you could actually have much sooner. And maybe if you in that you found work that you enjoy, you won't want to leave it in 10 or 15 years. And so kind of a whole frame of mindset that and that's what the third question gets you to. If you only have 24 hours left to live and looking on the life that you haven't gotten to live, like that, you don't know how much time you have left, and so you don't want to push things off that far.
But the inherent challenge in this is many, if not most of the clients we're talking to cannot achieve all of that super long-term vision within the next 18 months. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, to me, I kind of view this what we're doing here, that original question you were asking, it's really about helping get depth and clarity on what they truly want in life, right, first?
Right.
And then our job as a planner is to take their money and view it as a tool and look at how do we optimize for the life that they have. And most of the time we frame that in our business as hitting some 65 mark or 70 mark. But if instead we still focus on those, but we also look at, well, how do we help them live a more vibrant life today and still save for retirement? How do we help them live into who they want to be now and do those other things? Right? Because if we don't really just have one thing, which is money to invest in, we have time, money, energy, and talent. right? Those are really the 4 things you have to invest in life. And it's how do you optimize those for each individual sitting in those chairs. And then every few years, let's look at it again. You're 2 years from now, Tim, you'll have moved along, right?
Right.
2 years from now, your version of what a great life looks like will have changed a little bit. It may change drastically.
Right.
So we need to come back and keep looking at it and changing it. Always taking care of the future as well.
And I think, too, pinpointing what is truly the most important to that person and what will make the biggest impact on their life. So, maybe it's, no, you can't quit your job, but could you cut back hours to free up the time to do the other things that you wanted to do? So finding solutions like that, and to George's point, involving the client and having them figure out the solutions to what that could be.
And this is why financial planners are the right people to do this, because without the financial piece, people would just tomorrow think that you gave them permission to go live their dreams without any regard to reality and the money and what happens if they do live more than past tomorrow. And this is why you need the financial planner.
Yeah.
And we have ample stories of our clients that, you light their torch, you show them this vision. I'm thinking of one who we just met with a couple of weeks ago and showed her the impact of, if she did quit her job, this long term would mean how much less her family could spend every year. And 4 days later, we got an email. I put in my notice, so it's crazy how quickly people
And there was a
can
little
make
bit of
these
anxiety
changes.
on our part, like, hold on, let's double check the numbers.
But too, she needed that concrete financial piece to say, like, here's quantitatively what this means for your life.
And in a way, she had been wanting to do this for over a year, and it took the conversation with us to finally just, I'm doing it, and I can afford to do it.
One more thing that I just want to add, this piece, Scott was talking about energy as being one of the things you invest in. And what happens when you actually deliver something that's really exciting for the client that they really long to do is their energy level goes through the roof. And it means that they're able to accomplish a lot more things. They have more. They're going to have more money to invest because they're actually more successful at everything that they do. So that's what we're trying. A lot of what we're trying to do is to bring that vitality so the person is just flourishing throughout their life. Yep.
Scott Kraft, if you don't mind, I know this is going to be rhetorical, so you don't even need a mic for this one. But how did it feel when George mentioned your family members by name? Do you think that for many people, family is the most important thing to them? Mm-hmm. Do you think that being familiar with their kids and their spouses is going to make an impact? I know this is something that many of you already do, but it was the way that it was so conversant, the way that it just flowed off as though you had done enough work ahead of time that those names immediately came off your tongue. It struck me as powerful, and it seemed as though that was the first moment where you reached that level of emotional depth. Was it something you studied? You just remember everything you see at the first time?
Well, he didn't have the names of everybody there. He had Bev, his wife, so I knew that right away. Although I'm not sure he mentioned that Bev was his spouse. I mean, I could figure it out. But then Andy, I didn't have a clue who it was. So in the conversation, when he said, about his son in the business, I said, is that Andy? And so I picked that clue up. So you're picking clues up in the meeting, and then you're playing with it as you go. And yes, you do then reiterate. You come back. When you're doing the torch, you want it to be as personal and intimate as it possibly can be.
Yeah.
And notice on the torch, George didn't just tell him how it was going to be. He put it as Bev having a conversation with Scott, which made it far more personal. And again, removed George out of the situation. He gave enough details he had picked up to create this image and this scene, but also left enough that I'm sure Scott filled in a lot of details in his own head of what was actually there.
Yeah. The interesting thing there is, the EVOKE process gives you a framework to operate within. So to me, I kind of equate it to like if you have like the best jazz musician ever, they have to be well skilled and trained to know how to play.
Right.
But then they come into the room and they just play based on what's going on in the room, right? And that's really what George is doing here. He's stepping into a conversation, coming in with a beginner's mindset, coming in trained to handle this.
Right.
But he's going to allow the client to move that conversation and help guide them through it.
And speaking of the very best musicians in the world, good musicians are really good at playing. great musicians are really good at knowing when not to. And so let's talk about the pause and silence and the role that that plays and how hard that work is to do in a meeting as well.
We're all pausing.
We're all pausing.
I know. That was beautifully timed.
It's everything, really. I want to pick up also on something that Scott was just saying. We train, everybody here has been trained extremely well and very precisely. What you're seeing up here that I was doing, it's like I play the instrument of life planning. There are all these different stops, there's different keys, all this stuff. I know it all. And then once I'm here, a lot of what I'm doing is pausing and just noticing, where is it that Scott is moving? What is he feeling? And if he's feeling something, I want to pause. One of the things we do, it was mentioned that I followed the feelings. Feelings require a pause. And if we don't pause, if we interrupt with a thought, the client isn't allowed to finish that feeling. And then there becomes a blockage. And they're getting a little frustrated or a little annoyed inside of them. And so the pause is probably the most important thing we teach. I don't know how you guys are doing with it and if you have any stories, but it's where sometimes if tears start to come up, you might be tempted to reach for your spreadsheet and go, well, this is what we do, or crack a joke sometimes. But in fact, what you really want to do, or sometimes you'll want to reach over and tap them on the knee or something. And again, all of that is kind of blocking their freedom to actually move through the experience themselves. You want to show that you're empathic, but not take over the meeting. And you certainly don't want to take them up to their head with a question or a comment, other than a guttural that is empathic. I don't know if you all have any examples or anything you want to share.
I think you had a great example in the demo when you were reading his responses to the third question, and you said there were several bullet points and you were going to pause after to let him expand. And I think you read that first bullet point about his commitment to helping those who are voiceless, rise out of suffering. And it was beautiful and poetic in his response alone, and that could have been it, but you really paused. Yeah. And there was a moment I could kind of see he's like struggling to get it out, and instead of jumping in, you just sat with it and paused. And then he had even more to flow out of it, and it, just his response showed how deeply it touched him and it meant to him, so it added a lot of depth to the already beautiful answer that he'd written down.
You guys, the three of you, and Tim as well, you've been trained to pause. But how difficult was it at the very beginning of the training to actually pause in these moments? What happened for you? Because I think many in the audience are going, oh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, it was very hard for me, and my goal when I started the training was not to become like George, because I didn't think that was a realistic goal. You saw a masterful example, and I was like, maybe if I can just get 10% of that, how much better of an advisor will I be? And although if you can do it like George, you will be amazing, the bar of where most financial planners are having conversations is nowhere near that. If you can just get 10%, and you'll probably, and it builds very quickly, you will be so much better. Clients will share so much more with you. And in terms of the business side, once you've had those conversations with them, they don't want to go anywhere else because they think, you get me, nobody else gets me.
So true. To add on to that, the pause is really hard to learn at first. At least it was for me, because CFA, CFP, I have all the solutions. I want to tell you're giving me something I can tell you about, and especially I think
you've paid me.
Even for and for younger advisors especially, because I think a lot of the way that you show your expertise is technical ability, right? You're completely untraining yourself. You're teaching yourself to sit there and listen, and be with someone, and give them the opportunity to share the three things that they share with all the other prospective advisors, but they'll never go to that, like as George was saying, go to that level of depth, really show you who they truly want to be, right? And when that happens, it's It's amazing. And what you'll see happen in conversations with couples is that couples will turn to one another. I had it happen the other week, and they turned to her and go, I didn't know that's why you cared so much about travel. And it was because her brother had passed away younger in life, but he loved travel, and international travel specifically, and she feels like every time she takes that trip, she's taking it with him, and had never shared that with her husband.
Scott mentioned that they'll also tell you the things they tell all the other advisors, and it made me think of a client we have now that came in, we had this conversation. At the end of it, they said, well, I had scheduled meetings with 2 other advisors. You guys are the first one, but we've made our decision. And she said this without actually having the conversation with her husband, who was right there. They didn't go out. So it really is, once you get to that point, they're like, you get me. And then they may not go, interview the other 2 advisors.
Well, and what's so funny is, like you said, we don't demonstrate our technical expertise.
Right.
During that first discovery meeting, we have one with someone on Friday, and even we're preparing for all these other meetings, and as we're trying to manage our time, and I'm like, well, we don't have to do much prep work for that. We just need to read through their life planning exercises, and so it's like, but that's the meeting where they're going to be like, wow, I trust you, I want you. So it's kind of funny.
But what ends up happening is, the way that I view it is, this life planning technique is simply developing a lens for us to look through with our clients on all financial choices that they make. And so if I know that what's most important to, what we just saw with Scott, if Scott calls us and says, hey, I want to buy a McMansion lake house, on some island, and that really doesn't align with who you just said you wanted to be, right? So I'm not going to tell him that. We're just going to have a conversation around it. Well, you could do that, but if you do that, it's going to change these things in your plan. Would you like to look at that further? Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I don't want to do that. Thank you. And that happens all the time, right? Because we all go live life, and we just do what we normally do, and we go see that fancy lodge that we could live in a mountain town, and it doesn't really align with who we want to be, but in that moment, we think it does, and that's really valuable. The other component to that is that the technical aspects that we're all well trained in my opinion, in our business, will have, as time moves forward, those are the things that machines can take over.
Right.
This is the last thing that a machine can take over. Yeah, this is really valuable, and it allows people to step into who they're meant to be.
Now, do you guys recognize an irony here that this isn't so much one of these sessions where you're writing down a whole bunch of notes of the things you need to do more or better? It's actually like doing less. There's an irony to it, right? I see hands up. Let's get them. Ken, you got one? Very quick. Did everybody hear that?
0.
What percentage of clients do you have who meet with you who are not willing to engage and open up?
0 by design, because we won't work with clients if they won't do the exercises.
Right. Same.
So we require it. It's part of our sort of discovery onboarding process. And to be honest, I mean, there is a level of engagement from the beginning of how open people are, or how willing they are to answer these questions. But what's amazing throughout the process is if you create that space for them, you're open, and you do it in a great way, by the end of it, those people that you thought were not willing, they're the ones sharing their hearts.
So a few extra comments on that. On the intro call, the very first communication we have with them, we kind of prepare them. So there's an opportunity, if it's really something they will not explore, there's an opportunity to opt out before you spend too much time on it. But even as Mary was alluding to, the ones that are most resistant to it or kind of end up actually being the ones that have the biggest breakthroughs if they get through it. So it's very ironic there. The other thing is it's a lot to do with your own comfort. Like when you go to see a physician, they don't ask permit. They just kind of, all right, they ask you questions that would be inappropriate, you think, for anyone else to ask, and people just answer because you've set that as the expectation.
Yeah. Same answer. So there's 2 ways you can do this. It can either be something that you do, which means people can opt in, or it can be what you do, right? And I think from these 2 firms, it's what we do, right? Yeah.
But first and foremost, we do hold ourselves out as financial planners. We're not saying we want to be your guru and no, we hold ourselves on our abilities to do financial planning, and this is the way we do it. And we've gotten, introductory referral emails from clients that I want to introduce you to my financial advisors. They're, really great at the tax planning and all this stuff. Oh, and they've done all this other stuff in their life, like, you've got to talk to them. Like, you want them to recognize that you are a financial planner as well.
For sure. And Ken, note this too. I think in the hands of a master, and I'm not claiming to be there, this is an empathic process at its heart. And so if somebody isn't comfortable, quite inherently, you're not just going to jam it down their throat and force. You're going to go in the direction that they want to go. And ultimately, I think you get back to where you want to be. Does that make sense? But for those of you who are trying to think about how this thing can be positioned in a way that doesn't feel weird, when I have an intro meeting, I draw 2 circles in my Moleskine journal over a cup of coffee with somebody who might be interested in working with me. I put life planning at the center of it, and I say, that's where we start. We want to figure out what you're all about, what's most important to you in life, so that then we do financial planning that helps support your highest motivations in life. Like, that doesn't sound horribly weird. It establishes the expectation, so indeed, those who are just really completely shut off probably aren't going to be good clients in the first
I've
place.
used a similar analogy, and it's not my analogy. I don't know who originally came up with it in the life planning community, but we're really good at putting the pieces of your puzzle together. All the aspects of your financial life, bring it all together. But what's the most important thing when you're putting together a puzzle? It's the picture on the front of the box, and we need to know what that is so we know what we're building towards before we start putting all the pieces together.
It's a good one. Let's do these 2 more questions, and then we'll get you to lunch. How do you frame what you do?
Yeah. Do you mean how would we train you to do this?
In an intro meeting.
Yeah,
how would you
so-
frame it?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Mr. and Mrs. Client are sitting down. We've welcomed them in. I'll do the normal, anything you say is confidential unless you tell me where bodies are buried. And then it's really just, we do things a little differently here. We view money as a tool. And so most firms want to just go focus on your money all the time. And you just quickly shift to what Tim just pointed out. What we'd like to do is really have a conversation with you today about what you would hope to get out of life and where you want to go. Because by doing that, we'll get a sense of what we should be doing with your money. And with that, what brings you here today? And is there anything urgent? Right? Because if they say nothing's urgent, then there's no reason why they can't have this conversation with me. If something is urgent, we'll make sure that we get it addressed as quickly as possible.
And they usually have a reason they initially were looking for a financial advisor. So we do that on the intro call part, and you don't usually have to get them talking like, this is what I'm looking for, here's why, and we kind of let them get all that out, we talk about it a little bit, and then we start shifting it to, okay, here's how we would work together, and then by the end of the conversation, they decide whether they want to schedule that in-person discovery meeting, or we also meet with a lot of clients virtually and for video, and that's then when we send them all the questions, all the stuff that George was talking about, the 3 questions, the ideal day, week, and year, and that's the first meeting.
Yeah. So I think it's the expectation. We usually have an intro call,
Right.
get out all those normal financial planner questions, your fee structure, and
screening type
you
of
know,
stuff.
they might have questions about investment philosophy, sort of that. And then we say like, okay, would you like to move forward, come in for sort of a discovery meeting, and then we tee up, we'll send you these life planning exercises ahead of time, and here's all the financial documents that we're also requesting, and just sort of make it part of that document gathering, and then they're at home answering these questions and these exercises, so they sort of know what they're in store for when they come to the next meeting.
Let's do this one. We'll try and give quick answers, and then we're going to stick around for anybody else who has additional questions if you'd like to ask them. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I loved couples work more than anything. And when we do our trainings, I try to bring into the trainings, these small trainings that we have, the 5-day training, I try to bring at least one couple in to be a demo throughout. Sometimes we have 3 couples coming in. There's a very simple technique that we have with couples, and that is that if we feel, and there are ways of doing this, that one of the couple, one of the spouses is more dominant than the other, we'll ask permission to start with the one who's less dominant. And we do that, we might do that through, and if that continues to be the case, we will continue to start with that person, because the issue is that if the first person who is dominant comes out and says, my way or the highway, or this is what it is, and that subtext is there, then it's much more difficult to do the meeting. So one of the ways we do this is we'll ask the couple, we'll go, so which one of you would normally start this meeting? You know, and whichever one it is, we choose well, let's do it different this time. Let's do,
Let's do it the other way.
So we do a lot of couples training on exactly how to do that. And the other thing that we talked about with Scott up here is without both people fully alive in their torch, in their vision of what their life is meant to be, you don't have a strong marriage. And we strengthen marriages. It's one of the reasons I love couples work. We bring couples together, as Scott was saying, they'll fall in love again in the meeting because they are hearing these tender things and these things that they weren't aware of. So it's beautiful work, beautiful work.
And indeed, in closing, the biggest bonus that I have gotten from this work has not actually had anything to do with my work. I had been told for years that go to the 5-day, it's life-changing. And maybe because of the fact that it was 5 days out of the office, or maybe because of the fact that it seemed to be hyperbole to me that this could be life-changing, I avoided it. And then I finally went. The biggest and first takeaway that I had from doing the 5-day kind of intensive training was that I had an opportunity to be a better husband and a better dad. There is a process here that we are discussing, right? There's an EVOKE process that people can apply in the course of their work. But whether it is with our clients or the people we love dearly, we can find ourselves in the midst of, I'm in an exploration conversation right now, right? And then I'm going to look broadly to allow this person to do some brainstorming. Or I'm in the midst of a vision conversation right now. So now's an opportunity to go deep and really kind of nail this down some. We're addressing obstacles at this moment in time. Do you see what I'm saying? It is a process, but it is also a method to simply communicate more effectively. Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll stick around if you have any questions.